Maybe this will bring back a little bit of nostalgia for you. Do you remember as a kid playing with a toy like this? Or maybe for Christmas one year, you even got it maybe in your stocking or just as a gift under the tree, or maybe your friend had it. I remember a friend of mine having something like this, and I thought it was kind of fun growing up where, if I had something that I hoped for in the future, I could, shake it and see what it said. But we all know that this is just a toy, and we're all adults now, and this can't really tell me my future. But one thing that is for sure is that you and I still have hopes today. We have hope for what could come in the future. We have hope for what could maybe change. We have hope for what could come. And this is what we're going to be exploring today with Pastor Eric as we start our series, Future Bright. So make sure to stick around for the message. Welcome to SMCC Online.
Come out of sadness, come wherever you've been. Come broken-hearted, let rescue begin. Oh, come find your mercy, oh sinner, come kneel. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt and lay down your heart. Come as you are. There's hope for the hopeless and all those who strayed. Come sit at the table. Come taste the grace. There's rest for the weary, oh rest that endures. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't cure. So lay down your burdens and lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt and lay down your heart. Come as you are. Come as you are. Fall in His arms. Come as you are. There's joy for the morning. Oh, sinner, be still. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens and lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face.
Thank you, Cam and the band, for leading us in that song. One thing I want to let you guys know about is we're talking about Christmas. I mean, it's December now, and really getting into the Christmas spirit and putting up things around the house, your tree, your lights, all those things. Is we've got Christmas concerts happening at our northern location, actually really at our Draper campus, but for our northern locations that can join. I'm going to actually put a slide up on the screen with the times. It's on December 10th and 11th at our Draper campus. And I would really love for you to come. Maybe if you haven't been to one of our services before or one of our campuses, this is a great opportunity to come check us out and to just kind of get into some of the fun of this time of year. And actually, this Christmas concert is going to be kind of a 90s throwback. And I've already heard about there's going to be some Mountain Dew and some fruit roll-ups and lots of 90s nostalgia that you're not going to want to miss out on. So I really would like for you to go ahead now, mark it in your calendar, and make sure that you and your family have the opportunity to come. I think that you're really going to enjoy it. Now, as I was talking about earlier, we're starting a new series called Future Bright. And this is a 4-week series about finding hope in the shadow of unmet expectations. And so I want to go ahead and join Pastor Eric now as we start in our first week of this new series. Let's go ahead and join him now.
Welcome again to SMCC, whether you're watching online or you are engaging from the Lehigh location. So glad to be with you. I'm Eric. I'm one of the pastors here at SMCC. Now, growing up, every Christmas morning, after all the presents were unwrapped, my dad would always ask me this one question. He would come up to me and he would say, "Son, did you get everything that you wanted?" Now, this is a bit of a trick question I've learned as I've gotten older. In fact, I've asked my kids the same question. It's a bit of a trick question, though, because you don't want to tell your dad no on Christmas, but you don't want to lie on Christmas either. One year I wanted a trampoline. I did not get it. What was I supposed to tell my dad? Hey, even as kids, we are introduced to this interesting reality that we all now know is true. Christmas will leave some expectations unmet and unfulfilled. I mean, Christmas is guaranteed to let us down in some sort of way. But this isn't just a Christmas thing or a December thing. This is an all of life type of thing. Life will let us down at times. It will leave expectations unmet and unfulfilled. I mean, we all have hopes for a brighter future in some form or fashion, and we all know what it's like for that bright future to just never come. So here's what I think is very interesting. If you have unmet expectations now, some disappointments in life now, doesn't that mean that you once had hope in the past? And come on, if you want something better in the future, that means you have hope right now. So I want to ask you a question about hope. I want to ask a question to you about kind of where you stand with this. The question is this right here. What do you desire in the future? What is it that you'd love to see in the future? Something you desire, something you expect sometime. What is that for you? Perhaps it's a new relationship or a better relationship, a new boss, better boss, new job, better job. Perhaps it's just world peace. Perhaps it's for this pandemic to finally end. I mean, what is it that you want? See, I think we all have hope in some way, but we don't all hope in the same way. hope is a very complex word. Sometimes we use it as a verb. I hope that happens. We use it as a verb. But sometimes we use it as a noun. Hey, at least I have hope. And this makes hope a very complex topic, but it's a very important topic. I think it's crucial to live with hope to get through the challenging seasons of life. Everybody needs some hope. So I thought I would just clear some things up today. Just at the onset of this conversation, I just want to clear up a few misunderstandings of hope. I'll give you 3 very quickly. Hope is not a power, but it's powerful. I think some people think if I have hope, I can create my future, I can create my reality as if hope is a power. It is not, but it's powerful. Second thing, hope is not positive thinking, it's trust placing. See, sometimes when people talk about hope, they say, I have hope, as if that positive thinking were enough. It's not. Hope is trust placing. It's us taking our desires and expectations for something and placing it onto someone. Hope is trust placing. And here's the third thing. Hope is not about wishing or willing, but worshiping. And I hope to show you that today. See, we all hope for certain things, but we all don't hope in the same way. So let me give you just a very simple illustration to help you remember what I think the most helpful definition of hope actually is. And this rhymes, it's a little cheesy, it's a little silly, but I think you'll be able to remember it. Hope is like a rope. Can you just remember it like that? Hope is only as strong as the thing you are tied off to or anchored to. I mean, just picture yourself holding a rope and that rope is connected to or anchored to something else. That is what hope is. It's saying, I think that thing or that someone, they will deliver on my desires and my expectations. I'm placing my hope upon that. I am anchored to it. I am tied off to it. Hope is like a rope. So if someone says, I have hope, our follow-up question should be, if it's an appropriate time to ask the question, hope in what? Not hope for what? We all hope for some change. The real question is, what am I hoping in, or who am I hoping in? So hope, it is not unleashed with positive thinking, wishing, wanting, or willing. It's trust placing. And that's what worship is. It's placing our trust into something ultimate. So hope is like a rope. Now, here's what I'm saying. It is not enough to be a hoping person. You must be a hope in type of person, where you know what you've anchored your life to. You've anchored your desires and your expectations to. You know why you would anchor to that. You know what you'll receive when you do anchor to that. And there's evidence that the anchor will be steadfast. That is what hope is. It's not enough to be a hoping person. You have to be a hope in person. You know who you're trusting, why you're trusting, and what you are trusting them for. Hope requires evidence. Hope requires character. Hope requires follow through on a promise. And that is what this series, Future Bright, is all about. See, I think a lot of us have hope wrong, and at SMCC, we just want to help. So today we're starting a new series called Future Bright. It's really all about how to live with hope in the shadow, in the aftermath, or the wake of unmet expectations. And in this series, we're going to study the lives of 3 incredible women. Women who knew what it was like to live with unmet and unfulfilled expectations in the most heavy areas of life, the most emotionally taxing and draining areas of life, the most important areas of life. So we're going to look at their story, look at what they went through, and I think we're going to learn a lot about hope from these 3 incredible women. Now, the thing that connects all of their stories is something very serious, something very emotional. The thing that connects all their stories, of course, it's hope, but it's hope in the context of the inability to conceive. Now, when you hear me say that, I would imagine that for many people listening today, that triggers some very uncomfortable and some very painful emotion. I really understand that. I want you to know you're not alone with so many people who call SMCC home, and you're not alone with people like Sarah in the Old Testament, Rebecca in the Old Testament, Rachel in the Old Testament, and Elizabeth in the New Testament. And I hope just knowing that you're not alone brings a little bit of comfort. Now, inside of the pain and the tension of the inability to conceive, which some of you have gone through or are going through, in these women's stories, there are seasons and moments of rejoicing. And a simple, casual read of the Bible might make it look like, well, if I just pray or if I just trust God, He will fix this for me. But that's not what we see in these passages. In fact, what's happening in their story is God coming through on a promise. The promise wasn't for a child to a family, it was a child for the whole entire world. That God would save the world, meet the world's longing for salvation through one child. It wasn't a longing for a child to families desperate for one. It was a promise of salvation to the world longing for redemption. And that's what makes these stories different than our stories. That's where the stories diverge. Their stories are based inside of a promise that God would make to the whole world through Abraham, one man and one family. And so that's where our stories differ. So we're going to have to keep that straight as we dive into this series. But where our stories are very similar is that they knew what it was like to wrestle and struggle when hope has gone unfulfilled. When hopes are not met, expectations and desires are shattered. And so that's where we're going to learn a lot about hope. So this isn't a series on the inability to conceive. It's a series on hope in the most difficult seasons of life. And so today we're going to pick up the story of one woman. Her name is Sarah. And we're going to look at what she went through. It's incredible. So we're going to go to the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, the book of origins, and pick up the story of Sarah to see what it is that we must learn today about hope. Genesis chapter 11, verse 29, we read this. Abram, I'll call him Abraham at times, forgive me if I go back and forth. Abram and Nahor both married. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. Sometimes I'll call her Sarah. And the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. She was the daughter of Haran, the father of both Milcah and Iscah. So this is the beginning of some tribes, some lineages. Verse 30, now Sarai was childless because she was not able to conceive. It's an interesting detail that the author of Genesis, most likely Moses, includes for us right here. I mean, the author is setting up the origin of these cultures and these families, these nations essentially, and he includes this little detail about Sarah. We don't know much about the first 50 or even 60 years of her life, but we do know that right there. And this truth, this reality for her, it was a bitter reality. If you were unable to conceive in ancient cultures, it meant a whole lot. I mean, it meant lack of a legacy. It meant maybe lack of care in old age. It meant a lack of prosperity, most certainly. And it meant shame in the community. So this little detail tells us something about Sarah's life. And this would cause a lot of resentment and frustration and pain and emotional turmoil for her. So it's no wonder as we read the story of Sarah and Abraham that she was often lashing out. She was frustrated. She was angry at times. She had a punchy personality. But when we learn this backstory, we understand the struggle, the fight that she was in. Now, God would make a promise to this family. Let me read you that. This is Genesis 12 now. The Lord said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. So God's going to do something amazing with this guy, Abraham. I will make you into a great nation. Hold up. Great nation, my wife can't conceive. You begin to see the tension. And I will bless you. I will make your name great. How? My name will end, God. I mean, I have no one to carry it on. And you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. Whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth. All peoples on earth. Wow. That includes you and I. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you. This is officially called the Abrahamic Covenant. Promise to Abraham. And if you want to impress your friends with that phrase, Abrahamic Covenant, I mean, feel free, except your friends probably won't be that impressed. But this is important. This storyline, this promise is important to understanding all of the Bible, in fact. Now, what's important to see here is this gap the author of Genesis, has told us Sarah can't conceive, and also told us that Abraham would be a great nation and his name would carry on and the whole world would be blessed through him. How is that going to happen? You see the tension. You see the gap between what God said and what Abraham sees. Perhaps you've lived in that gap. Here's what God has said. Here's what I see. There's a massive divide. Abraham brings that up to God later. Genesis 15 now. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I'm your shield, your very great reward. Like, Abram, I'm with you. I'm going to do what I said I would do for you. Look at Abraham's response. Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? God, you made this promise. You have not come through on it. Are you really good? Are you really there? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, you have given me no children. Come on. You see how this is so tough for Abram too? He's saying, God, look, you haven't done what you said you would do. I have no children, no legacy. I mean, this meant a lot to Sarah. This meant a lot to Abraham as well. He says, a servant in my household will be my heir. That was very common. We'll see that in a moment. Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. God doubles down on the promise he has made. He took him outside. He said, look up at the sky, count the stars, if indeed you can count them, which, I mean, you can't. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. The multitude that you see up in the skies will be the multitude that comes from your family. So shall your offspring be. Here's what Abraham did. This is incredible. He's about to trust. He's about to hope inside of the gap between what God said and what he sees. Abram believed the Lord, believed him, trusted him, had faith in God. And he credited it to him as righteousness. Righteousness credited to Abraham, not because of what Abram did, but because of what he believed, because of his active trust. So God's promise was unconditional. He would show his goodness and kindness to Abraham, and through Abraham, God would show his goodness and kindness to the entire world. Now, Sarah had a key role to play in all this, and let's remember, she still has no child. The promise looks like it's gone unfulfilled, and this would weigh on her, and this would press in on her. Now, at this point, I just want to pause and talk a little bit about the struggle here in the waiting. I want you to know this. Hope is not belief in something without evidence, but waiting for something promised. See, now I'm talking about biblical hope, not cultural hope, not America's hope, not postmodernism's form of hope. I'm talking about biblical hope. See, when a lot of people think about hope, they think of longing for something, believing that something will happen without a whole lot of evidence to it. That is not biblical hope. Biblical hope requires evidence. It's actually built on something that happened in the past or was said in the past. Biblical hope looks back in order to look forward. See, Abraham had evidence that God is who he said he is and would do what he said he would do. And so although he can't see it yet, he was going to wait for it. Why would he wait? Because he has evidence to believe that God would come through on what he said he would do. So hope always requires some waiting for that which was promised. Now, biblical hope has content to it as well. Abram knew what was promised. He didn't just have what's the word I'm looking for? Fuzzy, there we go, fuzzy or foggy form of the future in his mind. He knew what was promised. So there was evidence to hope, evidence in who he was hoping in, evidence that God would come through. There was content to his hope. He knew what was promised. Now, hope is hard for me because I'm not a person who likes to wait. In fact, this got me in trouble just a few days ago. My wife and I, we stick to a budget. Carissa and I stick to a budget because we've decided we want to tell our money where it goes every month. And there are times where we've committed to the budget because we've committed to waiting for what we want. We wait for what we want. If it's not in the budget this month, we wait for it next month, or we save up inside of the budget for something that we want. Okay, so we have fun money each month. That's money that I can spend guilt-free. By the way, if you don't have a budget, it's a gift to a relationship because it can be the bad guy, not the husband or the wife or whoever. So, fun money, it's guilt-free spending, and I blew through all my fun money in November. Came to the end of the month, it was still November. and I wanted to play some golf, but my fund money was used up. So I came up with this quick little plan. Instead of waiting for next month to have more fund money, I just played some golf and just credited it, carried it over, put it to the next month, okay? Put it into December. I really wanted to play golf. I really needed to beat Pastor Paul, and I did. However, my wife found out. I didn't keep it from her. I told her I was playing golf, and she said, but your fund money's gone. And I said, no, babe, I got a plan. I'll put it to next month. And she said, so that's how this thing works. Guys, that's not really how it should work. I'm just not good at waiting. I'm just not good at waiting. And inside of that story, it's a simple story. We see what might be true in your life too. Hope is difficult for me because hope always includes some waiting, and I'm just not great at waiting. To be a person of hope, you have to be a person who's patient. And what we're going to see next is that Sarah was tired of waiting. She's going to take matters into her own hands. I mean, from what she can see, it looks like God's not coming through, so she's going to come up with her own plan to kind of come through in the best way that she knows how. Her childless years had loomed large. It seemed like God wasn't going to come through. She couldn't take it anymore. So here's what happens in Genesis 16. It's a long story, but I got to keep it short, and you can investigate it more this week. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. Okay, we've got that now. But she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. This is very common, actually. In fact, Abram already referred back to it. Maybe I'll just do this. We read that earlier. Maybe I'll just have an heir through one of my slaves. Now, this was very common. It's not great. It's not good. But in ancient culture, this was customary. This was very, very common. So she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Wow. So every recorded episode of ill temper, strife in this household that was about to come was just related to her frustrations with her barrenness. It ate at her. She desperately wanted to be a mother, and she decided, you know what? God's not coming through. I'm going to devise my own scheme to make this happen. It was inappropriate. It demonstrated that in this season, she just couldn't trust and wait any longer. And so she wanted to move forward and do something that many other people around her would have done, would have been very common, but it just violated the trust that God invited them to when it came to His promise for them. And so the story gets very dark. I mean, this thing tears their family apart in many ways, creates a toxic family dynamic for years and years to come. So Hagar would have Ishmael. And for about 13 years, there'd be strife in the family until Sarah convinced Abraham to kick the woman and the son out. It's this incredible story, and we see God's goodness to Hagar and Ishmael in this story as well. In fact, the book of Galatians in the New Testament uses this story as a case study for freedom and trust. It's very interesting. We just covered it in the Fully Delighted podcast when we walked through the book of Galatians. So this story would serve for years and years to come as an illustration of what not to do, but also what God was going to do inside of their mess. Now, I want to pause here and just observe something that I think is very important when it comes to hope and waiting and trusting. Here it is. There's always a temptation to short-circuit hope. By short-circuit, I mean, create your own plan, take things into your own hands to avoid dealing with the waiting and all that's involved with following a plan. When it's more quick and easy to do it our way, we can often short-circuit hope. When I was a kid growing up one year, I found out where my parents were hiding the Christmas presents. So one day I was home alone. I knew where they hide the presents, so I decided to go see what was mine. So I walk into my parents' closet and go behind this one shelf, and there it was. It was a brand new hockey stick. Guys, it was sweet. I was so excited. It was the middle of December, and now I had to wait for Christmas. So I thought this would be a good plan, and then Christmas rolls around, and on Christmas morning, here's the stick sitting by the tree, and my parents are thinking, man, this is going to be awesome. Eric's going to be so surprised, and I walk around the corner, and in that moment, I had to fake my surprise. I had to fake joy because I knew it was already there, but my parents didn't know that I knew. It made Christmas for me not the same because I short-circuited hope It robbed some of the joy. It hurt and it harmed, actually, the relationship. They did not know. My folks did not know, but I did. And I had to pretend that I was surprised by something I had already seen because I short-circuited hope. I short-circuited the gift, and it hurt the relationship. Now, this is still happening all the time. I mean, this can happen in how we go about our romantic relationships. Yeah, I know God says that this is best, but I want this now. This can happen. It can hurt and harm how we view our money. I know that God says this about finances, but you know what? I'm going to short-circuit his plan because I want this now. Guys, when we short-circuit hope to get what we want now, instant gratification in an easy way that we think will satisfy, there will be this harsh reality that follows. That, wow, maybe I should have trusted God, obeyed him, and waited to approach my life and these things in his way. Sarah short-circuited hope, took matters into her hands, and it brought hurt and harm into her life. And it's the same thing with us. But here's the good news. This did not void God's promise. God is still going to come through. Why? Because he made a promise and he keeps his promises. So let's read a little bit more. There's so much more of the story we could talk about, but I want you to see this part. The Lord was gracious to Sarah as he had said. God said I'd be gracious. God said he would come through, and he did. And even in the midst of Sarah's sin and her rebellion and how she short-circuited hope, God showed her better than she deserved. That's grace. He does for us. And the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant after all those years of the frustration and the pain and the struggle and the fight, and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the very time God had promised him. Now I want you to remember, this is about a larger narrative, a larger promise, not just one family receiving a kid. It's about God following through on a promise that would ultimately bring one child into the world to save it. That's what we celebrate this time of year at Christmas. Abram gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. There's a few ways to approach this laughter section, by the way. She had laughed before. We didn't cover that. We just didn't have time. It either means she was mocking God or laughter because she's so joyful. I'm not quite sure yet which one it actually is. Verse 7, and she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. So despite her occasional bursts, her temper, her struggles, her discouragement, she was a person who would still return to worship God. And God has kept his promises through all the drama, through all the struggle that goes with it, all the struggle with hope. God was faithful because he is. It's in line with his character. He did what he said he would do. And years later, Sarah's name shows up in the book of Galatians. It shows up in the book of Hebrews. In the New Testament, Sarah's story is talked about, her legacy. Inside of the good and the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, her story is mentioned years and years later. In the book of Hebrews, it's recorded like this. By faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who made the promise. The author of Hebrews would say, in all of the struggle, she still was a person who in some way took her next step to trust. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars. Remember that? God showed Abraham the stars. This author picks up on that theme years, hundreds of years later in the sky, and as countless as the sand on the seashore. So this is a story of hope. And I think there's 4 big things that we can learn about biblical hope from this narrative today. Let me take you through these 4 things. If you're a note taker, this might be a good chance to take some notes or get your phone out and snap a shot of the screen. Here's the first thing I want you to know. Biblical hope is based on a promise in the past. See, any type of hope without evidence in the past is empty hope. Hope requires content. Abraham was able to look at the evidence, the content in the past, and then look to the future. Biblical hope is based on a promise in the past. And I think for some, it's easy to think that these Christians just believe and hope because they can't see things and they want things to happen in the future, and it's somehow this way to kind of keep things going and cope with the hard times of life. But that's not what hope is for a Jesus follower. For a Jesus follower, hope is reasonable, rational, and logical. If it is true that Jesus was raised from the dead in the past, and the best investigation of the facts says that's actually what happened, then all that Jesus said is true, and we have hope in him for the future. Why? Because of what he did in the past. For Christians, we look back in order to look forward. We look back into history, reasonable history, archaeological history, so that we can look ahead to the future. Biblical hope is based on a promise in the past. Second, biblical hope is not immune from pain. I mean, any form of hope that just says, hey, at least you have hope, come on, just get through it, that's not biblical hope. Biblical hope stares pain down. It gets honest and real and raw about it. And because of that, biblical hope is all the more valuable because it grows and it flourishes through the fire, the furnace of life. The third thing is this: biblical hope guides us in the present. I mean, if there is something true about the future that we can expect and desire, then it guides us here and now. It tells us who to trust, why to trust, and what we can expect when we do. It guides us in the present to be people who obey, who worship, who trust, who pray, who live their life in light of the future that is coming, in light of a future bright. Here's the fourth thing. Biblical hope is the collision. It's the collision. These two things coming together, desire and expectation in the future. This is what I want, and this is what I can expect. And when I trust God, those two things come together. So today, I want to draw your attention to something that God has promised each of us. See, we've looked back to learn a lot about biblical hope, but inside of that promise, we see God has already fulfilled it. Jesus has arrived on the scene. So we don't sit here today longing for a child because a child has already arrived. So what is it that we look forward to? What future can we expect? Well, Jesus said something that's incredible. There's a lot of things that we can expect, and we'll talk about hope throughout the series, but I want you to see one thing about a bright future that awaits each one of us if we've trusted him. Jesus said this: do not let your hearts be troubled. This is in the book of John. Jesus is preparing his disciples for the trouble that's about to actually come. He says, but don't let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God. Believe also in me. Trust me. The type of belief and trust that Abraham had. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? Jesus said, I'm going to go through the cross, and I'm going to prepare a place for you so you can be with me. Look at this. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going. What is that way? Trusting him is the way. So Jesus is describing a bright future that awaits all who trust him. The bottom line today of the message is this: for those who hope in Christ, there's a bright future in his presence. That's part of the future bright that we need to embrace now. A bright future in his presence, that someday we will be with him where he is, in a place that's perfectly designed for us, in his presence. I don't know if that's something that excites you. I don't know if that's something that you think about often, but it's a hope that we can live with now. A desire for a place like that, in his perfection, in his glory, where there's no more tears. It's a desire we can have, and it's an expectation we can have, because Jesus has given us that expectation. That we'll be with him where he is, and therefore we can have hope. So I just want to leave you with one question as we wrap up part one of this series. How does thinking about this bright future in his presence change your present here and now? How does it impact you? Does it cause you to keep trusting through the hard times? Does it cause you to live with joy through the difficult times? Does it cause you to give and serve and love, connect in community? Does it cause you to meditate more on what that future would be like? I think that hope can cause us to live differently here and now. Because people who have hope are people that can face the most difficult things in life and know that there's something on the horizon. So come on, let's think more about that bright future, because when we do, we live with hope every single day. Would you pray with me? God, thank you for a chance to learn from Sarah. The pain of her story connects with many, many, many of us. And I just thank you that through her story, we see what hope looks like. Not this fairy tale, religious, churchy, Christmas card, Hallmark approach to hope, but a gritty, gutsy, at times messy and dark way of life where hope can enter in. And Jesus, that tells us a lot about hope this year, this Christmas, because inside of the mess and the darkness that we experience, we can long for a bright future because of what you've done. You did it in the past when you followed through on your promise with Abraham. You've done it for us as you followed through on your promise of salvation. And you will follow through on your promise of eternity. So help us be the type of people who live with hope now, because there's evidence that you, Jesus, have done what you said you would do. And we'll be with you in your presence someday. And because of that, in our present here and now, we can trust you, worship you, and walk with you, full of hope, even in the difficult times. Abraham did it, Sarah did it. Would you help us do it? It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Hey, thanks again for joining us today for SMCC Online. I've got a question before we kind of wrap up and a few things to let you know about. I just want to see, should you come to the Christmas concerts this upcoming week? I'm going to see what the Magic 8 Ball has to say about your future. It says you should definitely come. So I hope to see you at our Draper campus December 10th or 11th. And a few other serious things here. If you would like to connect with one of our staff or one of our pastors and ask them a question or just connect with them before you come to one of our locations, you can do that by visiting smccutah.org/nextsteps. And also, if you would like to help SMCC continue to provide more hopeful and helpful content like you saw today, you can do a few things. One, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. And two, you can partner with us financially. And you can find more information about that by visiting smccutah.org/give. Now, next week, Pastor Eric is going to be back here again for week 2 of Future Bright. And we're going to be talking about the story of Rebecca and the idea of myopic hope. I hope that spurs your interest. We'll talk more about that next week. Hope to see you here or at one of our locations next Sunday. Take care.